Tom Rosamilia.
Thank you. Thank you. I promise not to have any scary videos. Those were kind of frightening to see from Xander. Thank you for that after lunch. I started 35 years ago, and I was a coder, so I had an honest job at one point in my career. For 5 years, I wrote code. And I wrote code that runs in something we now call ZOS or MVS back in the day. And there's still some of my code running in nuclear power plants, in banks around the world. You can't interact every day. You touch one of my systems with banking, insurance, retail, and the like. So I have some bona fides in code, and I've always thought that, code we trust. We always say code talks, PowerPoint walks. So you really, if you want to pick a fight, do it with code. Code can really make a difference. And as we've seen, you can use your superpowers for good or for evil. And that's the question we come to, is it's always been about technology being used for good or evil, as we heard earlier. I think that is spot on. That's exactly where we are. And that's the world that we all wrestle with. Now, I voted for utopia, not dystopia, because I'm optimistic about where things can go, because we've been through transitions like this in the past. As you heard, I spent a year in China. I volunteered to go. I was looking to do some business development there. And I kept telling my wife, I need somebody in China to do this, I need somebody in China to do that. And one night she said, why don't you be the somebody? And I said, oh, well, you're going to go too. And we did. We spent a year in China. And I will tell you that while privacy is paramount here in Europe, what's amazing to me in China is there's really a lack of privacy, as you saw with all the closed-circuit television. You're on TV everywhere. You're always being watched. You're always being monitored. But I will also tell you that I was amazed by the level of digitization that's happening there. It is tremendous. I signed up for something called WeChat, which you may have heard of. And I linked my bank account to WeChat, and I paid every bill with WeChat. I transferred money to people with WeChat. I paid for a bottle of water on the street by scanning the vendor's QR code and paying him, a couple of RMB. Not a lot of money, 25 cents. Every transaction is done with WeChat. Vendors would be thrilled that I wasn't trying to pay with a credit card or with cash that they worry about could be counterfeit. No bill larger than 100 RMB, which is approximately $15. So if you really wanted to pay for something expensive, it's a lot of cash. Cashless society. There are over 1 billion registered users of WeChat. It's messaging, it's phones, it's directions, it's postings, it's contacts. Nobody has business cards anymore. You scan somebody's WeChat ID, and therefore you exchange that information. The second thing I explored was something called Mobike, stationless bicycles. May not sound like a big provocative innovation, but it's tremendous for solving the problem of the last mile. As people commute, get off the subway and have to get to work, and that last mile they don't walk, they get into a car. Well, not if there's a bike there that you can scan, unlock from above, and ride. And it's cheap. And they're everywhere. In fact, they're everywhere. It's become a big problem in China because there are so many bikes that it's even difficult to walk in some places, because you can find them anywhere and you can leave them anywhere. But every night, people ride around in these little carts and they relocate the bikes to where they're needed. No stations. It's like city bikes in New York City without stations, without helmets, without lights, without a lot of rules. But innovation is paramount there. Now, they also have an interesting idea of accountability that I think is something worth exploring. A college student, regrettably had cancer, did a search online, came back with a treatment. The treatment killed him. You know who was held accountable for that? The search engine. The search engine was responsible and was told, you've got to do a better job. You have to clean up your information. It was a return search. Can you imagine holding Google accountable for information you got from a Google search? I think that is the farthest thing from our minds, or maybe it should be part of our discussion, is who's responsible for what gets posted online? Who owns the content? The major television providers will tell you they do some analysis of the content. They'll have a debate. Somebody will challenge the information. It doesn't happen in other places where we get our information. And as you heard earlier, we don't know, is it correct, is it wrong? I will tell you the other thing they're doing in China to solve some of the problem is around air pollution. Anybody who's been there knows this is a problem. They used IBM technology, something we called Green Horizons. We developed it with our research lab. We could spot illegal factories spewing coal-fired foundries into the air. And they closed 8,000 factories around Beijing the last couple of years. And they really cleaned up the air. It's not clean yet, but it's way better than it was 5 or 10 years ago. They're really committed to it. And it's a difficult dribble because of the jobs that also costs. So it's a tricky balance. But they're using technology to improve the air quality. They're using technology for their quality of life. It's a very safe place to be, by the way, so that the privacy that you give up comes with security for most people. So it's an interesting society, and it's an interesting change for me to see what's going on there. Now, we're living with Moore's Law. I live it because I build hardware. I build the servers that run the world's infrastructure. And we've been living with Moore's Law, and Moore's Law is coming to a taper, I'll call it, not to an end. But I'm getting a lot less benefit for the investments I'm making in new nodes of technology. What I find interesting is it's still going, but it's more expensive for people to develop these new technologies. Metcalfe's law is actually about networks. And this says that the value of the network is equal to the square of the nodes. This is what causes Facebook to have such value. Because the network that you build up, think of all those nodes in the network. This is what makes WeChat that valuable, because all these people are now connected somehow. So Metcalfe's law is about the nodes in the network. The last one here that we talked about, we just heard somebody mention exponential growth. Xander did, and about the gap. This knowledge, this exponential growth in the amount of knowledge that we can have, that we can possess with things like Watson and other forms of artificial intelligence to help humans do things. You know, it's a combination of human and machine, not human versus machine, that I think is very important. This is about combinations, combining data, and doing it with all kinds of other tools and techniques to make people's lives better. If you think about what's going on in Japan, I was over there many times while I was in China, they have an aging population, aging problem. No one's going to be around to take care of the elderly. So they're inventing robots that can do home health care. That sounds like a terrific use of the technology that will help people. Is that putting people out of work? I don't think so. If I think about the kinds of things, the good things that can get done, this is really the combination, again, of human and machine. Now, I try to be a little dramatic, not as dramatic as my predecessor here, but to talk a little bit about what's good tech and what's bad tech. Well, I think we've all seen bad tech. We've all seen examples of where people are using your information without your knowledge and certainly without your consent. And in fact, in some cases, they're using your friend's information that gave no consent for that information. So that was a violation of our trust. I think that's the breakdown that we see. These things were used in political events to get lots of information about who would be the likely voter and who to target and the like. We've all seen this. I think the thing that's most surprising is how surprising it was to many of us that this was going on. I noted Apple was number 2 on the list, tied with IBM in trust. Tim Cook, who I've met a few times in China, had a great expression. I'll paraphrase it, but I'll give him credit for it. He said, if you're not the paying customer, you're the product. If you're not the paying customer, you're the product. So something that's free isn't. It's something you're giving up. You're giving up some amount of data, some amount of privacy for everything that you give. So lots of things can be done in this world, but if it's going to be free, somebody's paying for your eyeballs or for your data. We've seen lots of examples. People have done some amazing things with credit card fraud happening all over the world. You see all kinds of interesting ways people have done money laundering. The voter data, the hacks that we've seen, the phishing that goes on all the time. Amazing uses of technology, amazingly bad uses of technology. So certainly the technology can be used. Cybercrime by 2021 is estimated to cost $6 trillion a year. $6 trillion US a year. That's a huge sum. And so it's up to us in the technology world to protect people from that. And there's lots of examples of good tech that go along with that. I mentioned air quality in China. We've got Watson for Oncology helping, they've already screened 150,000 patients in the world. And people say, is it putting somebody out of work? Well, there aren't enough oncologists in India. So if this helps people in India get a diagnosis that they otherwise weren't going to get, that's a huge benefit. If you think about the underserved population today, I'm not so worried about AI. I'm not worried about it. I think it's going to change the way we work everywhere. It'll change all of the things that we do. But I'm not worried about the evil part. I think we can safeguard that. Orange Bank in France is using Watson to help their call center people to get better answers for people. It's not replacing it. In some cases, you see these emojis or whatever talking to you and helping you understand something. You can ask a question and get an answer from an advisor at UBS. But in some cases, it's helping people. And I think that's the way it's going to change jobs. Woodside Energy in Australia has increased their safety by 25% by using this learning from past behaviors and mining the information from people who are actually retiring. So they spent time training the system with machine learning and AI to help get it up to speed so that it could help future generations. I think there are 3 keys to how we ensure people use tech for good. To me, it comes down to an ecosystem of people and process, trust that we talked about, and skills. I think skills are another big part of this that we all need to invest in. You know, it's interesting to me that I studied computer science 40 years ago. It was a great field to go into. It's a great field to go into today. It's a wonderful career for us, for our kids, and for our grandkids. It appears to be going on forever, which is unusual, but skills are a key part of that. So let's start with the ecosystem. So it's important for us to, somebody mentioned behavior as one of the places, one of the key things. I've always seen transformations happen with a combination of technology, culture, and process. And that behavior, I think, is part of that culture. Technology alone doesn't change process. If you throw some great technology at people, there's nothing that happens. You have to change the way they work. And their culture has to be open to that. They have to be willing to change the way they work. It has to be a culture of integrity so in order to change those business processes. So the ecosystem of platforms and people, I think, is key. Everyone can build their own digital platform, connecting them together. I heard several good endorsements of blockchain. Blockchain is a great example of technology that is very democratizing. It really helps us in security, in provenance. I see some tremendous things happening. I'll go back to China for an example. Food safety is an issue. But by building these platforms around blockchain, they're able to track the food supply chain. Companies like Walmart, JD.com, with Tsinghua University and IBM have formed a food safety blockchain group. So instead of having to recall everything or not worrying about it, they can now narrow it down to this pig from this farm ate this food and got sick and pass that along. So now we can really narrow whether it's mangoes from Mexico or it's pork from a farm in China. Really helping us with food safety. So this is a good example of where that ecosystem of platforms and people can really make a difference. Now, the second thing I wanted to talk about is something called Call for Code. Has anybody heard of Call for Code? A few of you have. So we launched this program to reach developers. So we're talking about code here. Call for Code is a great example of that. We chose to do this, and the first, it's going to be a number of years. We announced it for the next 5 years we would do it. The first one was solving natural disasters. So it's a hackathon. We put it out there and said teams should volunteer to come up with their own ideas. We were overwhelmed with the number of submissions. 75,000 people in the world, developers, all contributed something to Call for Code. The deadline was 2 weeks ago, so the results have not yet been announced. But we're going to spend $30 million over 5 years on this, reaching out, and we'll pick a new social cause each year. and try to improve things. I'm going to show you an example of call for code with a short movie.
I saw, first of all, there was like a massive destruction. There used to be a basketball court. It was all destroyed. And in the parking lot of that basketball court, there was a message. It had the date. It had messages from families saying, hey, we're alive. There's 0 people dead in this community. We're okay. And you can see all these messages all around the island. SOS messages, if they need water, food. And that's really where the inspiration came from. So the idea started with OCR, object character recognition. First of all, I saw the big problem, the challenge of detecting handwriting, and I thought of a way we could standardize these messages. So I started creating a universal language based on icons. And in its implementation, it starts with this mat. Citizens and communities, they could place these mats either on the roof or in their parking lot, on the roads. They could put on the left side of the mat their needs. So for example, water, food, first aid. On the right side of the mat, you could put the number of people in that household or in that community. So I imagine that if we could make this kit standard and give it to citizens before a disaster, or make it a sheet accessible to them, so if they have only chalk and they don't have this kit accessible, they could draw it out. Then we could fly drones and then recognize them. So the drones, they could be automated, they could collect all this data and process it. I realized with technology, we can solve problems.
So this was Call for Code 2018. And this was sponsored by the American Red Cross for the US and by the UN Human Rights Office worldwide. A great partnership with those 2 organizations to help come together for Call for Code. Obviously, this example was based on what happened in Puerto Rico with the storm and people having to find a way to communicate and get the help they needed. It's a great story, very inspiring story, at least for me, from people in Puerto Rico coming up and figuring out how to solve this problem for the next group that experiences this kind of disaster. As you saw, 2017 had 2x the number in the world that 2016 had, and I think 2018 we're off to an amazingly bad start, or middle at this point. We've seen so many things happening in the world. So being able to get access to weather data from our weather channel, getting access to blockchain, using our IBM cloud, all of this was free for the people that wanted to do this. We're linking startups with companies, and it's all about programmers, reaching programmers and calling for code. Now, the winner will be announced October 29th. I cannot give you a preview of that, but I can give you one piece of information that's not public. We had lots of submissions from all over the world. Do you know what the #1 company with the most people who submitted applications was? Capgemini. Capgemini, and I can't do the breakdown for Sogeti. I don't have it at that level, and we won't ever have it at that level because some Sogeti people have Cap internet IDs, so it's hard to tell. 224. It was actually 2x the nearest competitor, 2x second place. So congratulations to Cap and the people at Sogeti who participated in this. I think it really makes a difference. Can't announce the winner, but I did tell you who had the most submissions, which was great. Now I want to talk about trust. The trust is the second part of this, and how do we build trust? Well, I think the first thing is being skeptical of how people are using your data. Being skeptical about instead of just clicking on whatever and say, yeah, whatever, actually determining, getting more publicity around how that data is going to be used. We look at it as the score of recommenders. Information is available out there on how people are using your information. And I think it's important to take certain pledges, and we've certainly done this. So the principle for trust and transparency in our case is the purpose of AI is to augment human intelligence. Data and insights belong to the creator, as do the AI engines that generate those insights. And all tech must be transparent and explainable. Who trained the system? What data was used? Can it explain the decision? Because as AI makes more decisions, you're going to want to know. One of the secrets about AI that's starting to become more well known is there's bias built in. So if you just allow the system to come to its own conclusions, you will find underserved populations not getting loans that may deserve them. But historically, they haven't gotten them. So the data is built into those systems to train the systems on how to act and what to do. And lo and behold, you get biased answers from AI. So AI isn't the answer for bias unless we debias the data, which we found ways we can do. The other thing is we promise to safeguard all of your data. The data is yours, the AI learning is yours. And I think that's a pledge we want other companies to take as well. We don't have to be alone in this. But your data is your data. 80% of the data lives behind a firewall today. So meeting you where you live and allowing you to do machine learning on that data, or you help clients to do that, is an essential part of this as well. You don't have to move all the data to the cloud. You can, or you can use data that's available to you remotely, but you can also get at your own data. And in any case, we're not going to share that information with your competitor. Your data is your data. Now, the last part of this one is skills. I am very heartened to learn that the number of enrollees in computer science is finally going back up. It hit a peak around the year 2000 when the internet bubble burst. And lots of people said, the heck with computer science, I'm not doing this anymore. And we went into a trough of enrollees in computer science. In the last 5 years, that number has gone way up. In fact, above the bubble of the year 2000. The number one reason driving kids to school to major in computer science is AI. So we're starting now to graduate students who have a degree in computer science with a major or a minor or a concentration or whatever it might be in analytics, data analytics, and artificial intelligence. So I think that's going to be really helpful to us all because we know we're going to need more data scientists. But the other part of this is what my boss calls new-collar jobs. She coined the term new-collar jobs because, as I said, all jobs are going to change based on AI. We need to train people to use technology in their work. They don't have to be technologists. They don't have to be computer science majors. They can use what we call P-Tech, which is a 6-year program starting at what would be around age 15. In the US, that's high school. But it's 4 years of that plus 2 years of junior college to give you an associate's degree with technology. We have about 120 schools around the world now. We have 400 industry partners who have teamed with us to have these people coming out with the degree they need. They're not going to necessarily code the next operating system, but they're going to be familiar enough with the technology that they can use it in their day-to-day work. And I think so investing in schools, investing in skills is a key part of this initiative to build these skills. So I think, as I said from the beginning, I'm an optimist. I voted for utopia. I think it's going to take work for us to get there because there's so many pitfalls along the way. But if you can work with companies who are going to safeguard your data, safeguard the relationship you have with them, safeguard the algorithms that get developed, and use technology for good, I think that's a good start. And then I think we all have to be a lot more wary about who's using our data and what are they using it for, and how could it be misused. So with that, I will just say thank you. I look forward to spending the next day with you. I'll be here through tonight, and then I have to leave. But I'm anxious. If you have I have 5 minutes left if you wanted. You said you might want questions, but we're a little bit behind, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
I'm watching IBM still has 29, so it's close.
Yeah, so you did
Yeah,
well.
bouncing
You did
around.
well, yeah. At least you didn't. At least you didn't lose.
I didn't drive it down.
So
Thank
Menno
you.
and Pierre are going. Wait. I have some questions. Going down the audience to see if there are some questions from the audience. So first, of course, I'm extremely proud that we have won the code.
Absolutely, 224.
I understand you cannot announce it yet here, but still I'm very happy
No,
to
no,
have
no.
one,
You think you won the award? Oh, okay. No, you got the most participants so far.
Okay.
Your
Well,
odds are good.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So that's why I believe. So let me first ask you questions about this education. So we already see this Frankenstein factor, right? People being afraid of technology, believing that technology will take their livelihood. We are creating maybe a new class of Luddites. What can you do about it? Is education enough, or should you do more?
I think if you think back in history, if that was our approach, we never should have invented any kind of mass manufacturing. We shouldn't have invented the plow, because it put farmers at their time, they had to change the way they do work. So assembly lines and plows and anything we do in automation can is going to change some jobs, it could cause jobs to be replaced, but it's going to create other opportunities. To me, we live in a wonderful time where we see all this potential for artificial intelligence, but I don't think it's going to put people out of work. So I think it's going to help the way we work. It's going to change the way almost everybody works. It's already changed the way I drive, right? There's some level of autonomy in my car. It helps me. It saved me from an accident about 6 months ago. A car in front of me decided to stop at a light I wanted to go through, and my car stopped me.
And probably
Amazing.
you would have crashed when you...
Oh, absolutely. I was hitting the gas. Lights turning yellow, hit the gas. Guy in front of me said, no.
So why is it that we have this debate that some people say, okay, this technology is only creating bad things, that technology will be bad, but at the same time, we understand that without technology, we understand cars kill people, but that doesn't mean that we stop driving cars.
Right.
It means that we try to make better cars.
And think about the innovation that's gone into cars.
Yeah.
It's amazing what we can prevent.
Is it the technology players that are driving that, or is it the insurance companies that have driven the security of cars?
I think technology, because I think that the innovations that before you got to pay for now become standard because it's the cost of being in business.
Okay.
Even on some of the most basic cars.
Questions from the audience at this time?
Maybe in between, Michiel?
Yeah?
Can I raise a question otherwise? Of anyone here at the table? So I was looking at the outcome of the voting of the audience, and are you okay with this ex aequo IBM Apple? Does it feel good?
I voted for both, so I was good with it. I think given the choices, I mean, there may be other, I would have voted for CAP, but that wasn't one of the choices. So
You make my heart break.
But I think that if you think about this, I think Apple's doing a pretty good job of doing what they do, and they're not a monopoly. They have a fraction of the market out there. I mean, you had a BlackBerry on your slide, by the way. I saw. Did you notice that? So I thought maybe it was an antique. But I think Apple's done a great job. I think their innovations are terrific. I happen to use a lot of their products. I'm paying for we pay a lot for Apple. It is not free. It's the furthest thing from free there could be. And the technologists in China are walking around with iPhones. Those that want price performance buy Xiaomi phones or Huawei phones. There's a lot cheaper technology out there. They're the furthest. I don't think they're a monopoly at all.
Is there an explanation, a relationship between these trust levels and the amount of transparency that these players give to what they do and what they don't do with technology?
I think so, and I think that's why Apple's been very transparent with what they do. They made it really easy for people to use, and I think the things that we're doing, where we're going out of our way. We just announced something called AI OpenScale, which gives you trust and transparency in your AI, because you want to know, why did I grant that loan, not grant that loan? Why did I make this decision, not that decision? It's really important to have traceability of that decision.
And accountability.
And accountability for that decision, because somebody might say, well, you didn't give me a loan because of my color, or because of my race, or because of my religion. And you need to be able to prove, no, I didn't give you money because you're not worth it. You're too high risk. But if you can't show somebody that data, you're just going to get sued. and you're going to say, oh, the AI did it, the black box did it. I don't think that's going to be a reasonable defense.
Does it mean that when you want to be accountable, that you have to keep people in the loop? That
Absolutely.
at the end there should be a person with compassion and empathy?
Absolutely, and I think that's why I say it's a combination of human and machine. It's not human versus machine, it's not machine instead of human. I think people are going to continue to be really important, so I don't...
And do people, because you have this powerful Watson technology, right? You're driving this AI revolution. How do you prevent people from rejecting it, from being afraid of it, from embracing it, that they maybe a doctor becomes a better doctor because of technology?
Yeah,
How do you do that?
You know, it's interesting because we chose medicine and we did it because it's a very noble cause, and I believe in it wholeheartedly. But I will tell you, I'm a doctor through marriage. My wife is a doctor. And the industry is not great at adopting new technologies. Not, you know, I'm still filling out paper forms where I go, and, you know, they moved to EMR, but they largely digitized the form, which is, if you think about early days of forms online, it was basically taking the paper form and you could type now instead of writing it. It wasn't a huge change. It's come a long way since then of the way we input information. Medicine is kind of still stuck back there. So it is, as I said, it's process, culture, and technology that you need to change, to transform. And that's been a challenge with medicine.
Okay. We have one question from Stefan.
Yeah, I mean, you were passionate about the evolution in China. I also saw a research study about the speed of artificial intelligence in China and the belief that they will overbeat the rest of the world, especially the US. But how do you, from IBM, cooperate with China and benefit from the trends in China in IBM?
So they have an initiative called Made in China 2025. I would say the two most important ones are Made in China 2025 and the One Belt, One Road initiative. One is really about world trade and the other is about local manufacturing. They really want to build a lot of things locally. And I just went to a session on the West Coast with a former US trade representative who actually opened up the WTO to China. So she was impressive to talk to about why she did that and how she did that. But we talked a lot about One Belt, One Road and the vacancy that's been left, I would, without getting too political, by people in the world deciding to take a step back, like the US. And Made in China 2025 is all about local manufacturing. They need to know they have a reliable supply chain. And I think if you think about not tariffs so much as ZTE was a great example of why they justified their need for local manufacturing. Because the US decided to cut off their supply chain, said you can't buy Qualcomm parts. That's a big deal. That would have put that company out of business. So I'm partnering with them. I just announced, we just finished forming a joint venture with a company called Inspur. They now make Inspur power servers. So my power technology inside an Inspur processor. They build it themselves, so it's, I'm sorry, my chip inside their servers is the way to think of it. They're the #1 server provider in China. So I'm doing it with China instead of, it's not manufactured in China, it's designed and made with China. And I think that's what people are going to have to do. That's what the car manufacturers had to do. Technology didn't have to do it for a long time, and I think now we do.
Interesting. So I have a last question for you, Tom, because we're running out of time. So if you look at the future, you're an optimist. But what is your worst fear and your best hope when you look at the future?
So I think we always keep saying we're on the verge of something. I don't know if we've hit bottom, by the way. I think I don't think there is a bottom. I think it's going to bounce for a while because we still see these hacks happening that, you know, new forms of hacking like Spectre and Meltdown, and people are coming up with ingenious ways to be evil. And I think there's no shortage of the desire, the passion. I think when we went from hackers to state-sponsored hackers and terrorists, basically, that upped the game completely. And they can hold your data hostage. You know, they've shut down hospitals, they've shut down all kinds of businesses by holding your data hostage and making you pay a ransom.
Extortion, yeah.
Complete. And you know, people pay the money sometimes. And so I think, you know, the possibility for evil, we should never underestimate how dangerous these people can be and what they're looking to do. And they're smart. They're smart. They get in and they stay below the radar. You know, there were systems that we saw recently and hacks that happened in the last couple of years. That code sat idle for 6 months.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Didn't do anything.
They're patient, very...
Didn't do anything. I got time. I got time. And then all of a sudden, you know, they try to not set off the meters that say, all of a sudden there's a flood of data going to one place.
So that's your worst fear.
Yeah.
What's your best hope?
My best hope is I see the possibilities of what technology can provide. And if it can really make doctors better, if it can really make businesses run smoother, if it can really help us. I mean, I use Alexa at home. You know, they're a competitor with AWS, but you know, it's great technology. I think it's a wonderful way to listen to music, to get a weather report, all kinds of it, turn on the light in my house, all kinds of interesting things that technology provides. So I have great hope that humankind and the kind part of humankind will prevail over evil. All right?
Thank you very much.
you.
Thank you.